Well, I'd say America has to be the strongest country on the face of this earth. And it must be willing at times to be unilaterally powerful, if necessary, for its own purposes. And that's what it means to defend and protect against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And having taken that oath, and having sat in the Intelligence Committee room and signed the documents with 3 signatures each time at different appropriate spots to look at what is going on in our country as far as intelligence gathering and the dangers that are there, and the war of terrorism, and Brian, you're right to state that this is an evil empire, radical Islam. There is no question about that. And to take that for granted, that we can go in and we can have rules of engagement that are politically correct and still accomplish what needs to be done for our people, let alone the peace of the world, is absolutely and arrogantly wrong. I'm so encouraged that Barack Obama has made one good decision recently, and that's bringing Petraeus back into the mix. Because I understand Petraeus, having talked with him, having heard him say these things, that he believes clearly that in war, our warriors, whether it be Marines, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, you name it, they must be able, in the carrying out of a war effort, to inflict as much pain and damage on the enemy as humanly possible. And ultimately, history shows us, we not only win the war, but we win the peace, and we save a lot of lives in the process. Nation building is part of that. Marvin and I would disagree to a point with you. That there are times when, in order to secure the victory that we achieve, we have to make sure that what we leave is at least stable enough to carry on freedom. Maybe not the same democracy as we have, the same exact system, but allows people who have gone through this period, and our blood of our warriors have been shed there as well, that doesn't fall over overnight. Ultimately, you're right. They have to be able to stand on their own. But there are times, as we saw in Europe, as we saw in Japan, even as we vanquished, ultimately bringing them to a point where they could live freely, and they could ultimately, many, if not the majority of citizens there, could look at America and say, we didn't believe it then, but we believe it now. You assisted us. You helped us. God bless America.
All right, thanks. Let's go on to a topic I think has been talked about a little bit in the last few months. That's healthcare. How much do you feel, do you want the federal government involved in our healthcare? And would you repeal and reform? What would you do with HR 3590, which is the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act healthcare bill passed by the Democrats? You can go first.
Well, I think I can make it briefer in my answer this way, because I've already answered it to you. I had a bill, a patient-centered approach, which was a free market approach. So I'm absolutely opposed to government being in healthcare. There's some minor regulations on safety and cleanliness. But other than that, buyer beware, patient beware. We have a healthcare system that is second to none. Our healthcare that's second to none. The system needs reform. We repeal and replace. We start by not funding in the next term. Don't give the budget. Don't give the dollars to the president to implement his healthcare takeover. Hold it off for 2 years. Come back, and during that time, with all sorts of ideas that I expressed to you in single bills. Let the American people start talking about it. They read bills, Congress doesn't. They can generate an echo chamber. By the time 2012 comes and we defeat this president, put a new one in that'll sign patient-centered healthcare reform, we move forward.
You say you're against government, except for regulation, and again, this will flow down to all of you. What about Medicaid and Medicare?
Well, I think that's an example why we cannot let this healthcare takeover take place. Medicare is there. We're not going to overturn that. We can hold it back. There are people that are expecting something. We found that Medicare Advantage was really the system that worked because it had a private sector component to it. Medicaid the same way. We have to not expand the programs, find ways to reduce the need for it, get more private sector involvement. But right now, Rick, the issue is stopping this healthcare takeover before it becomes an entitlement. Because once an entitlement becomes an entitlement, as Reagan said, the closest thing to eternal life on this earth is a government program.
Thank you, Jeff. Brian?